Story 1. The Night Nurse Who Was Never There. You ever walk those hospital corridors at 3 a.m. and feel like the walls are watching you? Like something's lurking just past the flickering fluorescent lights? Yeah, that feeling isn't just in your head. Here's what happened to my mate Sarah, a night nurse at an old NHS hospital somewhere near Manchester. Sarah was fresh into her night shifts, the kind where the world outside is dead silent except for the steady beep of monitors and the distant call of pagers. One night, around 2:30 a.m., she was making her usual rounds, checking on patients, charting vitals, the usual grind. As she walked down the long, dimly lit east wing, she heard soft footsteps behind her. Not the usual shuffle of staff or the distant wheeling of beds, but slow, deliberate footsteps, like someone trying not to be noticed. She stopped, turned around, but no one was there. The hallway was empty, but the footsteps continued, echoing softly, fading around the corner. Sarah's heart skipped. She thought maybe a patient was wandering, so she called out, "Hello? You all right?" No answer. Shrugging, she moved on, chalking it up to exhaustion messing with her head. But as she reached room 312, a notoriously haunted ICU ward, she felt a cold breeze brush past her neck, like icy fingers grazing her skin. The lights flickered violently, and the heart monitor in the room started beeping erratically without reason. Sarah stepped inside. The patient was there, hooked up to machines, breathing steady. Nothing wrong. She looked at the bed next to him, an empty one, but suddenly the forward drip started swinging, as if someone invisible was holding it. The monitor next to the empty bed screamed static and beeped, lights flashing like a strobe. Sarah froze. Suddenly, a whisper filled the room, barely audible. "Help me." Her blood ran cold. She whipped around but saw nothing but shadows. Then, behind her reflection in the window, she caught a glimpse of a pale figure. A woman in an old nurse's uniform from decades ago, eyes hollow, face pale as death. Sarah bolted out and reported it the next day. Turns out, years before, a nurse died mysteriously in room 312 during a night shift. Some say she's trapped, still roaming, trying to care for patients even in death. Sarah never worked night shifts again. Story 2. The Silent Patient. This one came from an old paramedic I know called Dave, who worked at a big city hospital's emergency ward. He told me about a night that still haunts him. It was a freezing winter night, snow falling thick outside, streets empty, emergency doors banging shut with every gust of wind. Around midnight, paramedics brought in a patient, middle-aged man, no ID, unconscious, no pulse but breathing on the machines. Weirdly enough, he was completely silent, never making a sound, eyes closed tight. Doctors tried everything, but no one could figure out where he came from. No reports of missing persons matched him. No family called. No history. Dave was assigned to monitor the patient that night. Around 3 a.m., he noticed something strange. Though the man was asleep, his eyes fluttered beneath his lids, and sometimes his head twitched like he was watching something invisible. Suddenly, the machines started acting up, monitors glitching, alarms beeping for no reason. Dave swore he heard a low growl coming from the man's room. It was like something trapped inside was fighting to get out. Curious, Dave approached the bed. The man's eyes snapped open, except they were pitch black. No whites, just endless voids staring into him. Dave stepped back, heart pounding. Then the man whispered, not in words but a chilling hiss, "Don't look behind you." Against every instinct, Dave turned. And behind him, reflected in the glass window, was a dark figure, a shadow with glowing red eyes crouched watching. Dave ran out screaming for help. By the time doctors arrived, the man was gone. No trace. The hospital CCTV later showed the door opening on its own at 3:07 a.m. and a shadowy figure vanishing down the hall. No one ever found the man again. Story 3. The Midnight Surgery. This story is a classic, told by one of the hospital surgeons who swore never to speak of it outside the OR. Let's call him Dr. H. Years ago, during a brutal winter storm, the hospital was flooded with emergency cases. The power flickered, generators hummed, and the OR was tense. Everything was on edge. Around 1:45 a.m., a man was rushed in after a severe car crash, unconscious but stable enough for surgery. Dr. H and his team prepped, but right before they started, the lights cut out for a moment. When power snapped back, the man on the table had changed. His face was pale, eyes wide open, staring straight at the ceiling, but not blinking. Dr. H shrugged, chalking it up to trauma and adrenaline. Surgery started. But as the procedure went on, things got weird. The monitors showed impossible vitals. Blood pressure dropping, heart rate rising and falling like a broken wave. The machines beeped irregularly, and the surgeon swore he heard whispers from the corners of the room. Then the man's hand twitched on the table, slowly, deliberately, like trying to reach for something unseen. Suddenly, the anesthetist gasped. The patient's body convulsed violently, too strong for someone under anesthesia. The oar went silent. Then the man spoke. His voice was cold, emotionless. "Why are you here? This place, it's not meant for the living." Everyone froze. Dr. H looked down. The patient's eyes had turned completely black again, and his mouth opened wider than possible, as if trying to swallow the entire room. The lights flickered off again. When they came back on, the man was gone. No pulse, no body. Just empty sheets and a lingering cold. No one believed Dr. H's story at first, but days later, the hospital reported an unexplained death in the morgue. The man's body never returned from surgery. Dr. H never scrubbed into a midnight surgery again. Story 4. The elevator that went nowhere. Alright, picture this. A hospital elevator that's notorious for acting up. The kind that makes staff avoid it unless they're desperate. Now in this story, we meet Mike, a paramedic working graveyard shifts, who got caught in a nightmare no one talks about. It was a slow night, and Mike had just finished dropping off a patient at the emergency ward. He stepped into the elevator to head down to the parking lot. Wanted to clock out early, chill for a bit. The elevator doors closed, the lights inside flickered, but then it just stopped. Dead. Mike pressed the emergency button, but all he got was static. Minutes felt like hours. The cold metal walls seemed to close in. Suddenly, the elevator jolted violently, and the lights went out completely, plunging Mike into darkness. When the lights snapped back on, Mike wasn't in the hospital anymore. Instead, the elevator opened onto a floor that didn't exist. The hallway was long and dim, but not like the usual hospital floors. Walls were peeling, the air was thick with dampness, and the smell was rotten, like something died long ago. Mike stepped out cautiously, looking down the corridor. The silence was suffocating. No machines, no distant voices, just the echo of his footsteps on cracked tiles. He tried calling for help, but no response. He walked, searching for an exit, but every door he tried was locked or led to empty rooms filled with broken hospital beds, old wheelchairs, and faded charts strewn about. The deeper he went, the more the hospital decayed. The ceiling tiles crumbled, fluorescent lights buzzed erratically, and shadows stretched unnaturally long. Then Mike heard it, a faint crying coming from the end of the hall. He followed the sound to an old patient room. Inside was a little girl, pale and thin, sitting on the floor, rocking back and forth. "Are you okay?" Mike asked. She didn't answer, but her eyes met his, deep black voids, just like the others. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind him. Mike's heart pounded as he tried to open it, locked tight. The girl whispered, "You shouldn't be here." The lights flickered one last time, and then everything went dark. When the elevator lights came back on, Mike was back inside, shaking and drenched in cold sweat. The elevator dinged, and the doors opened to the regular parking floor. He ran out and never used that elevator again. Rumor is that floor is a ghost hospital, trapped between worlds. Staff say it appears only at night, and only to those who are truly alone. Story 5. The Phantom Doctor. This one is from a security guard named Karen, who worked the night shift at a large city hospital. Karen's job was mostly quiet patrols and keeping an eye on the CCTV screens, but one night, things went sideways. Around 1 a.m., Karen was checking the surgical wing. The halls were empty except for the faint hum of machines. On one camera, she spotted a man in a long white coat walking briskly down the corridor. Problem was, the hospital had no doctors scheduled that night. Curious, Karen zoomed in. The figure's face was blurry, but his movements were stiff, almost robotic. Karen decided to investigate in person. As she approached the wing, she heard the distant clatter of surgical tools and muffled voices. She peeked into one of the operating rooms. Inside, a surgery was underway, but something was off. The doctor wasn't human. The man was tall, but his skin looked waxy and stretched tight over a skull that seemed too large. His eyes were deep pits, glowing faintly blue, and his fingers ended in sharp claws, not nails. Karen gasped and stumbled back. The doctor turned his head slowly towards her, expressionless. She ran and called for backup. When security arrived, the room was empty, surgical tools scattered as if someone left in a hurry. The next day, hospital staff checked records. No surgery had been scheduled or performed that night. The patient listed for that room hadn't arrived yet. Karen quit her job soon after, but swears she saw that phantom doctor again on the cameras during her last week, standing silently, watching the corridors. Story 6. The Whispering Ward. Okay, this one takes us to a mental health unit inside a hospital, one with a reputation for being especially eerie. Sophie was a young nurse assigned to the psychiatric ward for her first year. She quickly heard the stories, patients claiming to hear voices no one else could, lights flickering in empty rooms, shadows moving just beyond sight. One night, Sophie was finishing her rounds when she entered Ward C, a section closed off years ago due to a tragic fire that killed several patients. She was told never to enter after hours, but curiosity got the better of her. The door was unlocked. She stepped inside. The air was thick with dust and decay, and the smell of burnt wood lingered. As she walked down the darkened corridor, she heard faint whispers, like a chorus of voices repeating the same words. Sophie followed the whispers to room 17, the site of the worst fire. Inside was nothing but ash and blackened walls. Suddenly, the voices became clear. "Help us, free us." The temperature dropped drastically. Sophie's breath turned to mist. From the shadows, figures emerged, ghostly patients with hollow eyes, mouths moving but no sound coming out. One reached towards her, and Sophie ran screaming out of the ward. The next day, staff found the door to Ward C wide open. No one dared enter again. Story 7. The Last Call. Our final story for now comes from a paramedic named Jamal, who worked long nights in a hospital's ambulance bay. One freezing night, Jamal got a call about an elderly man found unconscious in a park. When they brought him in, he was barely breathing. They rushed him inside, but something was off. The man's eyes flickered open once or twice, and each time, Jamal felt like the man was staring right through him, as if he could see beyond the living world. The man whispered repeatedly, "Don't let them take me." Jamal stayed by his side, watching the monitors. Suddenly, all machines flatlined. The room plunged into silence except for the man's faint breathing. Then, the hospital's emergency lights started flashing. Jamal heard footsteps, heavy, slow, coming closer. But no one was there when he looked. When doctors returned, they found the man's body cold, lifeless. But Jamal swore the man's eyes were open, looking terrified. Later, Jamal heard that the hospital morgue was haunted by spirits unwilling to move on, trapped between life and death. The man's last call was a warning: don't let the darkness take you too soon. Story 8. The Night Nurse's Shadow. Meet Lena, a night nurse working the oldest wing of the hospital, the part everyone calls the basement. It's cramped, outdated, and avoided even by the bravest staff. One night, while doing her rounds, Lena noticed a dark figure standing near a nurse's station. At first, she thought it was one of the cleaning staff, but as she got closer, the figure vanished. Shaking it off, Lena kept moving. But then she started seeing the shadow more often, in the hallways, just out of the corner of her eye. One evening, a patient whispered to her from the bed, "The shadow watches us. It takes the sick." Curious and creeped out, Lena decided to follow the shadow the next time she saw it. It led her through twisting corridors until she reached a locked door she'd never seen before. The shadow passed right through it. Lena tried the door, but it was stuck. Suddenly, the shadow reappeared behind her, whispering, "You can't leave." Lena sprinted away, heart pounding, and found the door to the wing locked tight behind her. The next day, the hospital staff found a faded plaque near the locked door, marking a quarantine ward shut down decades ago during an outbreak. No one knows what really happened in that wing, but Lena quit the job, convinced the shadow was a remnant of the patients who never left. Story 9. The Vanishing Patient. This one's about a patient named Mr. Harris, admitted for routine tests, but vanished without a trace. One nurse, Tom, was assigned to care for Mr. Harris during the night shift. Tom remembers the man was quiet, almost too quiet, never complaining but always staring blankly ahead. One night, during a power outage, the hospital went dark. Backup generators kicked in, but certain sections remained unlit, including the ward where Mr. Harris stayed. Tom checked the room, empty. He searched the whole ward, then the whole floor. No sign of Mr. Harris. When the lights returned, the hospital's records showed Mr. Harris had been discharged earlier that day, but no one had seen him leave. Security footage was wiped clean, and no CCTV cameras recorded him after a certain time. Some say Mr. Harris was never really a patient, just a ghost trapped between life and death, wandering the hospital halls, waiting for release. Story 10. The Crying Baby. Last up is the story of a maternity ward with a dark secret. The staff there would often hear the sound of a baby crying late at night, soft, desperate, heartbreaking cries. But no babies were born or admitted during those hours. One nurse, Sarah, decided to investigate. She followed the crying to an empty nursery at the end of the hall. The crying stopped as soon as she opened the door. Inside, the cribs were empty, but Sarah felt a cold presence. Suddenly, a baby's face appeared in the window, pale and ghostly, mouthing, "Help me." Sarah called for help, but no one else saw anything. The hospital later discovered that a newborn had died mysteriously in that nursery years before. Staff believe the baby's spirit lingers, searching for comfort or a mother's touch. Sarah left the hospital soon after, but the crying baby's legend still haunts the halls. If this gave you chills, hit that like button. Got your own creepy story? Share it below. For more dark tales, subscribe now and don't miss out.